I grew up in a wooded region of upstate New York in a little town called Minnesink, approximately 60 miles north of the city. Although my parents at the time were struggling with extended family issues as well as finances, I can recall only good things from my childhood. We lived on a 7-acre property with pines that littered our backyard and rolling hills in the front. It was an exemplary place to experience my childhood, rural and friendly environment, with plenty of room for fun and activities. Neighbors were scarce, and vehicles were seldom. In 1992, before I was old enough to remember anything and could just barely walk, I was apparently outside in the front yard while my mom was on our porch watching me and my older brother play relatively close to the road. All of a sudden, a blue hatchback came creeping up our street, very slowly, and paused to the entrance of our driveway. Again, this was odd not only for the fact that we lived in such a rural area, but the occasional car we did see drove excessively fast, since our road was pretty much barren of anyone and anything. My mother became concerned because, to her recollection, she had never seen this car before. The man had apparently waved at my brother and I and smiled. Too young to comprehend the whole stranger rule, I had waved back and giggled and inquired my mother as to who was sitting outside our driveway. She quickly told us to go inside as she acknowledged the man. He looked her square in the eyes, expressionless, before exposing a smile from ear to ear and raising his hand in a chilling wave, slowly descending and ascending, each finger rhythmically. He proceeded to drive off, and my mother didn't allow us to go outside for the remainder of the day. My mom told my father what occurred once he arrived from work, and he was indifferent over the situation. He suggested that we could inform our neighbors of the incident the next evening and keep a neighborhood eye out for any suspicious activity. But other than that, he was at a loss of what should be done. He also decided to lock everything in the house, doubling down, including the latches on the garage doors, which we rarely did. My parents had done everything in their power for protection and began to shake off what had happened once they were preparing to sleep. Later on that night, my mom had the ritual of waking up at 3:30 in the morning and stepping outside in our garage for a cigarette. That particular morning, she groggily stepped outside, sat on our freezer, and had a smoke. Toward the end of her session, she heard a very subtle noise toward the automatic garage doors, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She sat and attentively listened before realizing that something or someone was turning the handle at the bottom of the door and trying to lift it up. Paralyzed in fear, she heard the rattling for a few moments more until she quietly stepped into her bedroom and woke my father up. He grabbed our shotgun, went outside, but did not see anything. No one was there. However, my mom swore up and down like nothing before about how she would not make a mistake of a noise like that, even in her most groggy state. She was certain also that it was the man she'd seen earlier. An animal would not have been able to turn that handle, let alone attempt to lift it. All of our neighbors were older and very trustworthy too. We all kept in close contact with one another, and we all kept an eye out for each other as well. My parents informed the police about the man, and there was a patrol set out to our area for the night, but nothing suspicious had turned up since. About a year later, my mother was in our living room watching the news when an important broadcast appeared. A serial killer had been caught in our county, dubbed the Robo-Cop, Nathaniel White, because his killings were influenced from the movie. He had stabbed and beaten 6 people fairly close to our house, including a pregnant woman and a 14-year-old, and dumped their bodies in various places. The man who was charged was undoubtedly the man who had stopped and waved at us. My mother is entirely positive and swears on her life. His face still sticks with her, with that evil grin reviewing my brother and I. I wish my dad would have blown Nathaniel's brains out and sent him to hell before he could kill again. But I'm just grateful that the watchful eye of my mom and More importantly, a tiny metallic latch prevented us all from an untimely and grotesque death. This happened 2 or 3 days before Ted Bundy was finally caught. My mother and father had moved to Tallahassee just a few weeks prior and were living in a so-so area of apartment complexes. My dad was in school at FSU and had a Monday science lab that would let out at unpredictable times. My mom, not yet having found a job and was pretty bored most of the day, would walk to campus on Mondays to try and meet my dad if the timing happened to be right. But this particular day, his lab had let out before she got there, and she didn't see him, so she walked back to their apartment. As she was walking, with no one else in sight, she turned the corner onto the street where the apartments were on the other side of the road. Just as she did this, a guy in a red-orange Volkswagen Beetle, a pretty rare car, especially in color, was coming down the street toward her and leaned over and waved at her in a really friendly, excited manner. She only saw him briefly and not very close, but he was young, dark-haired, and she didn't recognize him. My mother was confused. She and my dad didn't really know anyone down there, but she gave a small wave and a tepid smile back. They had met another young couple a week before, and for a second she wondered if it was the husband, but then thought it would be weird for him to wave in such an exaggerated way at someone he only knew a little bit. She suddenly recalled the murders of some college girls from FSU that had happened a couple of months before, and started to feel uncomfortable with the current situation. Wanting to check to see if he was still around without really obviously turning and looking, she realized that if she crossed the street toward her apartment, she could get a good look to her right more naturally. As she did so, she saw the car had stopped just across the intersection she had turned the corner around initially. She could see by the lights that this guy was sitting with his foot on the brakes, and worse, that he had his head tilted up and was blatantly watching her in his rearview mirror. She also knew the particular duplex he was stopped in front of was vacant, so there was no way he was waiting for someone outside. My mom was thoroughly freaked out and trying to figure out what to do at this point. There were no cell phones, of course, back then, but my parents didn't even have a landline in their apartment yet, as they were still getting set up. However, there was a nice thick tree up ahead a little, and she realized that if she walked behind it, she could then walk at such an angle that the tree would block his line of vision of her for quite a while, and he wouldn't know exactly where she was. She did this, and after getting a decent bit further, she peeped around the blocked line of vision, and his car was gone. She figured he realized she was onto him and didn't want to deal with a woman putting up a fight. As I said at the beginning, Ted Bundy was caught just a few days later in an orange Beetle that was stolen 2 blocks from my parents' apartment. He almost always stole Beetles to get around, likely comfortable with them since his own car was the famous beige Beetle. Bundy would apparently often return cars he'd stolen after using them to murder people, and my mom thinks that's what he was planning on doing, but changed his mind, and that's why he was back in the area. Thankfully, my mother was wary and not killed by Ted Bundy, and because of that, I'm able to bring you this story. So, a little background here. My father was in the Army for 21 years, retired, and moved to a very small town in Central Florida. He got bored after a couple of years, and even though we didn't need the money between his retirement and what my mom was making as a bookkeeper, he wanted to go back to work. He started working at various gas stations, and it being a small town, the owners wouldn't care if I came there and helped him out with stocking the coolers or even running the register, as long as I didn't sell any beer or cigarettes. This all took place in the late 80s and early 90s. The actual story I'm going to tell took place in 1990, and I remember the date well because it was shortly after my birthday, and being 15 in Florida, I had just got my learner's permit, and my dad would let me drive him to and from work, just to get some experience on the road. both at day and at night. I was sitting in my usual spot at a table that was set up along the windows, book in hand, feet propped up, and a Mountain Dew on the table, along with some snacks. I would generally spend most of the evening that way, reading books, getting up to run the register, stock the cooler at different times. I remember glancing up because something caught my attention that was unusual, and I realized that a lady was walking up our parking lot from the direction of the interstate. The gas station was right on I-75. This in itself was really strange because where we were located, you didn't get many people walking. And definitely not walking from the direction of the interstate. I figured she'd broken down somewhere and was coming to use the phone to call for a tow truck or something. I was completely wrong. She came into the store, looked around for a few minutes, and I remember just getting a strange and creepy feeling about her. She walked up to the counter and started telling my dad a story about how she'd gotten stranded and needed a ride up to the next big town up north from us. Ocala was the town. My dad lets her know that he's working and there's no way he can take her. She turns and looks at me. And while she's looking away from him, my dad catches my eye and subtly shakes his head no. I was confused for a second, but then she turns back to my dad and points at me, asking if I can take her. My dad responded back that I only had a learner's permit and wouldn't be able to drive her anywhere and then drive back. Normally I would have done it, even though it was illegal, because I had done it a few times already. I didn't argue with my dad, though, since this was completely out of character for him. He was normally chatty with the customers, but for whatever reason, he was almost curt and dismissive of her. Turns out, he had a bad vibe about her from the minute he'd seen her walking up the drive. Well, she cusses him out for a minute, and he basically tells her to get out of the store. She slams the door and leaves. I thought the glass was going to break of how hard she slammed it. She stalks out of the store and down the driveway. I keep an eye on her and continue to watch as she makes her way back up the interstate and then starts up the northbound on ramp. Almost a year passes and I'm in my bedroom less than a week before my 16th birthday. I hear my dad yelling from the living room, "Son, get your ass in here and look at this." I quickly run to the living room and see my dad pointing at the TV and look at the mugshot of the lady up on the screen and immediately remember the lady who had been in the store. Turns out, I almost gave a car ride to Aileen Warnos, who was later convicted of being a serial murderer and then later put to death. I still have nightmares about what could have happened. My grandfather sighed as he took his last cigarette out of the packet. This is his story. I used to live in Norwood, working as a local handyman. My motto was cheesy, like, "When you need a hand, I'm your man." But there was one appointment that I'll never forget. I was relaxing in my backyard. It was a nice sunny day. Life was good. I was getting a steady wage. Family was all great. It was the happiest I felt in weeks. The phone rang. It was strange as I hadn't gotten any calls for a while. I leisurely strolled indoors and picked up the phone. "Hello, Lenny, your local handyman speaking. How may I help you today?" Sort of raspy voice whispered back, "Yes, hello, I've got a blocked sink and I need you to take a look at it." "Sure," I answer. "Can I take your name and address?" Silence. "Hello, are you there, sir?" Sorry, yeah, it's John Gacy. And your address is?" And he gave the address. "Okay, I should be around within the next, say, 2 hours." The next thing he said sent alarm bells off in my head. "No, that won't do. I've got some things to do." And then a high-pitched scream rang through the phone and almost deafened me. He hung up. About an hour later, the phone rang again. It was Gacy. "Sorry about that. My budgie's got his foot trapped in his cage, and it looks like he was in a lot of pain. I had to help." Are you still good for a couple of hours now? I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to make it tomorrow. Okay, say 9? Okay, see you then. I was restless that night. I could still hear that blood-curdling scream. There was no way it was a bird. This weirdo was hiding something. Part of me didn't want to go to his house in the morning, yet part of me did. I rolled out of bed in the morning, ate a quick breakfast, got into work clothes, and drove to this guy's house. His house was nothing fancy, just room enough for a couple, I would say. I rang the doorbell and waited for this guy to open the door. He opened it very slowly, and when he saw it was me, he beckoned me to come in. Gacy himself was a larger gentleman with bright blue eyes. His eyes were his distinguishing features. Right through here, Lenny, he said. How are you today, Mr. Gacy? I said. Fine, he replied bluntly. So I'll take a look at the sink and hopefully sort your problem out. He left the room and I started to get to work. After about 30 minutes, I found the cause of the problem. It was a massive bit of red hair. I had noticed Gacy didn't have red hair, neither did his wife or children. So where did this come from? Mr. Gacy didn't come back for a while, so I sat in the kitchen while waiting for him. When he did come back, I thought I heard a muffled cry for help. Probably nothing, I thought again. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, though. I tried to pinpoint the sound and thought it was coming from the cupboard under the stairs. I turned the handle and saw a yellow and red clown costume. But the terrifying thing was that it was covered in blood. I heard the front door handle click, and I quickly slammed the door and ran to the kitchen. Mr. Gacy? I called out. I fixed your sink. He handed me $60 without speaking a word, and I drove home. The cries for help I thought I heard, and the costume plagued my mind that whole night. What was this psycho hiding? I was just about to fall asleep when car headlights illuminated my room. I peeked through the blind and immediately recognized the car on my drive. It was Gacy's. What made this even more terrifying was that he was dressed in that uniform I saw earlier. He had white makeup on and a bright red nose and a red wig. The hell did he want? I heard my letterbox click. He put something through it. I crept downstairs, and as I was doing so, he pulled away. I picked up this magnolia envelope with Lenny scrawled in childish handwriting on the front. I slowly tore open the envelope and pulled out a letter with a photo attached. The letter read, Lenny, if you tell anyone about what you saw or heard today, there will be no family for you to come back to. All my love, Pogo the Clown. The picture attached scared me even more. It was a picture of my children hugging Gacy dressed up as a clown. Gacy had this sinister, murderous grin on his face, and on the back of the photo, scrawled in the same handwriting, was, he, I can get to your family as easy as 1, 2, 3. I've never told anyone else about this experience. I like to think that I've protected my family from this psycho, but it plagues my life every day that I could have saved all those kids. My grandfather told me this and broke down in tears.